Landslide kills the several people in Germany following a flood of death that claimed more than 110 lives and has left 1,300 more are missing, and it could get worse, with fears reservoir dam is set to burst. Landslide has killed several people in Blessem, near Cologne, in the wake of historic flooding in Germany. The death toll from the disaster has risen above 110, with some 1,300 missing in country's deadliest flood in decades. Majority of missing hail from Ahrweiler district, south of Bonn, where rescue operations continue today. At least 15 died in neighbouring Belgium, while homes were also evacuated in Netherlands, Luxembourg and Switzerland amid fears of fresh disaster with more rain forecast. Several people have died in a landslide that hit a flood-damaged town in Germany, as the death toll from the country's worst flooding crisis in decades topped 110, with some 1,300 people missing. Homes and part of a castle in the town of Blessem, near Cologne, were demolished on Friday's waterlogged ground collapsed into a nearby gravel pit, certainly causing deaths, though officials were unable to immediately say how many. A rescue operation now underway to try and evacuate at least 15 people stranded in the town amid fears of a further collapse, with helicopters brought in to airlift them to safety. Some 55 residents had been evacuated overnight due to flooding, but an unknown number returned today to examine the damage, officials said. The national death toll from flooding now stands at 103, spread across the states of North Rhine-Westphalia and Rhineland-Palatinate, though most were concentrated in the district of Ahrweiler, south of Bonn. Towns and villages in that district were almost completely destroyed overnight Wednesday when the Ahr River burst its banks, sweeping away homes even as terrified people sheltered inside, with officials warning the death toll there is likely to keep rising. The flood is one of the deadliest to hit Germany in modern history, with one of the only comparable tragedies coming in 1962, when more than 300 died in flooding in Hamburg. I fear that we will only see the full extent of the disaster in the coming days, Chancellor Angela Merkel said in a grim warning issued from Washington, as newspaper Bild branded it a flood of death. Meanwhile, at least 15 people died in neighboring Belgium, with thousands of homes evacuated in the Netherlands, Luxembourg and Switzerland as rivers burst their banks. And there were fears the unfolding disaster could get even worse, as people living below the Steinbach reservoir were evacuated amid warnings the dam could burst, while more rain forecast for the west of Germany threatened to raise the Rhine River to dangerous levels. Hampering search efforts was the collapse of mobile phone and internet networks in the Ahrweiler region after telephone poles and transmitter masts were swept away, making it difficult to track down the missing. Roads were also swept away or blocked by debris, including trees and cars, cutting off entire villages as the army deployed helicopters to pluck people off rooftops. Retreating floodwaters exposed some dead bodies to rescue teams, while divers were also used to enter flooded houses and search for the missing. Regional Interior Minister Roger Lewentz said that some of the dead had initially evacuated their homes, returned to try and bail out basements believing the worst was over, only to then become trapped as the water rose again. He told broadcaster SWR that we believe there are still 40, 50, or 60 people missing. And when you haven't a T word for people for such a long time, you fear the worst. The number of victims will likely keep rising in the coming days, he added. Armin Laschet, the premier of North Rhine-Westphalia, blamed the extreme weather on global warming during a visit to a hard-hit area. We will be faced with such events over and over, and that means we need to speed up climate protection measures, because climate change isn't confined to one state, he said. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen also attributed the destruction to climate change, coming just a day after the bloc put forward plans to slash carbon emissions by 2050. It is the intensity and the length of the events that science tells us this is a clear indication of climate change, and that this is something that really shows the urgency to act. Von der Leyen told reporters. Around 1,000 soldiers have been deployed to help with rescue operations and rubble clearing in affected towns and villages. Meanwhile, police in North Rhine-Westphalia said they had arrested 5 people suspected of looting from evacuated towns, including one man found inside a jewelry store and 2 women in a supermarket. Streets and houses underwater, overturned cars and uprooted trees could be seen everywhere the floodwaters had passed, while some districts were cut off from the outside world.